This is the primal scream of a dying regime. Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish, in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Good evening, Harnwell here at the helm on Steve Bannon's War Room. If you stay watching the show through to the end, which is in about an hour's time, we'll be discussing a story of this young 28-year-old kid, Navy veteran. They were just about to turn, in fact, I think they already had turned the machine off. They were just literally about to harvest the organs. And he woke up. And the reason why Frank and I will discuss this is that it doesn't have any particular overt religious elements to it, apart from the fact I think it's a very good illustration of what the Catholic Church teaches about the sanctity of life from conception until natural death. But we'll hit that at the end of the show. First of all, let me welcome on Frank Walker. Now, Frank, good evening to you. I know you've made a great sacrifice to join us today. We won't go into details, but we will wish you an ongoing speedy recovery. We'll start off with this article, which we didn't have a chance. I think I might have mentioned it at the end of last week's show, from The Pillar, which is an analysis of the spending of Peter's Pence, which is that fundraising vehicle of the Vatican. Huge, many tens of millions of donors' money, millions of dollars of donors' money goes into that fund. Some of it goes to inverted commas good works. A lot of it goes into propping up the Vatican's running costs, its basic budgetary support. Interestingly, and the reason I wanted to chew this over, Frank, with you this evening, I think it reframes some of what the more widely optimistic expectations on behalf of the conclave when they elected Leo. You speculated on Canon 212, Steve speculated on the War Room that this was simply the priority of the Cardinals trying to lasso in an American Pope, on the back of which the idea was, the fond hope was, that the cash would then start ringing ever more loudly in the Vatican's registers. Interestingly, as we go to the figures, that's only partly true, but not remotely in line with the expectations. So let's go through this. First of all, perhaps you just say a few words, because many people, many even practicing Catholics who go to Mass on Sunday might be unfamiliar with Peter's Pence. Could you say a few words what that is as an organisation, and then we'll just work out from there and talk about the finances that just been declared over the last couple of weeks.
90% of Peter's Pence comes from Catholics in their parishes and masses. So it's a source for the worldwide church to fund the Vatican, and the Pope supposedly has discretion on what to do with that money. And then during the Francis era, there were a few scandals about what happened to Peter's Pence. The money was used to fund like gay Elton John movies and condos in the Tony sections of London that turned out to be big boondoggles where a bunch of consultants made money. People pulled back. The Americans donors made kind of a stink about Peter's Pence. And there's a big push and a big discussion. Now that we have Francis gone and we have this new Leo, and Leo's an American, the funding is going to come back. Most of the funding of Peter's Pence comes from America. I mean, it's still only like 26% of it, but it's more than any other region. And they thought it would get really big, and this would be a whole new thing. And it was the same way with it was a whole new pope. It was not Francis, but when you look at the statistics for 2025, the Peters Pence contributions have dropped a little bit. I mean, they haven't had a surge. They haven't even had an increase. And you would think that maybe that the increase would be in the donors, the American wealthy donors, but in that 10% of wealthy donors, it's remained about the same. So I think this, puts a capper on that whole idea of Leo bringing in a whole new, push and cash source, at least through Peters Pence, to the Vatican.
It's, I think, wading through the figures, and it's sort of, from what's publicly available, it's difficult to understand intuitively. But it seems to be a drop from the total income from 2024 to 2025 seems to be a slight drop from 58 million euros to 57.6 million euros. But they've massively reduced the expenses. I'm going to come back on to these amorphously described expenses in a moment. The American contribution, as you were saying, has noted a slight uptick from, I think, 25.2% of the total revenue for Peters Pence in 24 up to 26.1, as you were saying, for 2026. So the overall revenues are down, but the American contribution is slightly up. But it's not what they call the press call this the expectation, the new Pope bounce. So it wasn't even a dead cat bounce, frankly. Looking at this, let's go on. Looking at some the expenses part of this, because I have to admit to having a slight confusion here, because it says that the expenses were 59.8 million. And the total income was in at 57.6. So it's running at a deficit, even if the deficit, we are told, is coming down. And you mentioned the scandals over the Francis years. They were sort of really siphoning off the money from Peters Pence to, they said it was to bail out the bankrupt dermatological hospital. I think it was. But the wider fears was that even that was a front, and that it was going, who knows where it's going, knowing how Italian politics and finances work, of which the Vatican is simply an exaggeration of all things Italian. Anyway, but here's the thing that I think the Vatican might need someone to just gently go up them, pat them on the back and explain how this works. You cannot, as an organization, continue to hit wealthy American capitalist businessmen and entrepreneurs over the head with your communism. You cannot spend, as an organization, telling every day these people that they are moral evil, which is exactly what Bergoglio was doing, and then expect them to cough up and bail you out on your running costs and say, and respond, no, it's not us you're helping out financially. It's the gospel. It's the kingdom of Jesus Christ, which is their shtick. And of course, if you are a wealthy American entrepreneur, the chances that you're going to be a gullible moron are effectively nil. So you see what the Vatican's doing. You see it's tamping down on preaching the gospel and expanding the preaching of communism, and you're sending out your cardinals to do the same with that message. You're sending out your bishops and priests to do that same. You're going big on the invasion. Do that, but then don't sort of then rub up against the wealthy American entrepreneurs and say, now give us your cash because Christ demanded of you. That's obviously going to be a failing strategy, but that's where the Vatican is right now. Frank Walker.
Yeah, and he attacks their faith directly. Not only does he attack capitalism and give them communism and perhaps attack their personal politics, but he attacks their faith. And it's not really reference how the expenses have dropped so much here, but perhaps it has something to do with the fact that they sell a lot of real estate. They have lots of amazing real estate that belongs to the Vatican, and they're selling that and they're putting it on their bottom line. And that is exactly what they do all over the world. All over the world, the only thing that's keeping the church alive is selling churches, selling them off, closing, consolidating. It's the same thing all over the world where they're attacking the faith, the Catholic faith, attacking the Catholic people, feeding them garbage politics. This whole thing shows everybody that Leo, I think, is to the left of Pope Francis. Leo is more strident, more combative, more liberal, and less Catholic, and more political than Francis ever was. So this is perfectly understandable that this article at the Pillar indicates that financially, that's kind of a loser when it comes to Peter's pence. Anyway, I think somewhere along the line, there's globalist money lined up to fill in deficits in the Vatican. But whether or not we're going to see that, like you mentioned, the Italian politics, Italian economics, Italian money, accounting, there's a lot of sneaky tricks that go on there. I think there's always going to be globalist money for a pope like Leo, but whether we'll see it, I don't know. It's not coming out here, and there's no American surge.
Well, there's no American surge, and this is why some critics have referred to the Vatican's PRing to say that they're getting their finances turned around as being more mirage than miracle, which I think is pretty much accurate. I just want to say this, Frank, before we move on. The post-conciliar church, the church, that institution that calls itself the Catholic Church, post-1965, has presided over a decline on every metric unprecedented in the true Catholic Church's 2,000-year-old history. They've presided over an unprecedented numbers of closures of seminaries, convents, monasteries. The religious orders especially have been decimated of vocations. There's a massively aging priest profile that's going upwards from, I think, in the 70s and 80s now. That's the average age of the priest here in Italy. So you have all these problems, and as you just said, they are desperately trying to paper over the perceivable huge cracks in the edifice by selling off properties and assets that were paid for by the collection plate offerings of the faithful over 2,000 years. They're selling these, selling off the family silver. And Frank, I think the thing that you and I find most appalling about this is that they're not reversing on the factors that have pushed this institutional post-conciliar church into this implosion. In fact, they're doubling down on this, as we saw with the excommunications of the SSPX. That's the tragedy about this. They know full well exactly why people are abandoning the Catholic Church. They're doubling down on those. We mentioned the Cardinal McElroy of Washington, D.C., who's signed an order to prohibit, just last week, I think, to prohibit any altar rails being put in Catholic churches across his diocese. And of course, this is the point. Some of these Novus Ordo-minded priests of a conservative bent think if they just put in the altar rails and get the faithful kneeling reverently, sort of all the problems will go away. Well, we understand what the sentiment is, and it's not even totally misplaced. And that's why these so-called cardinals who loathe and hate the Catholic faith, the only thing they hate more than the Catholic faith are the actual Catholics who hold that faith. So why, in an act of pure spite, they've said, no more altar rails. Those altar rails that haven't been ripped out thus far over the liturgical vandalism of the last 65 years, right? No more altar rails. So they know what the cause of the implosion collapse is. They're doubling down on that and selling the assets that were paid for on the offerings of the saints and the martyrs and the
Oh.
faithful over the last 2,000 years. It's disgusting, Frank Walker.
Their anti-Catholicism is above everything else, completely everything else. And so you'll never get them. They'll call their new idea renewal. In Ireland, they have no vocations. The bishops are saying, we need to renew the way we handle our vocations programs. It's always renewal. It's never Catholic. And because of that, it just dies. These people are parasites. And they live off a living church. They're just killing it. The living church is not part of what this apparatus is all about.
They are parasites. They're parasites and usurpers. All right, Frank. Well, let me just give a quick shout out to our sponsor today, Birch Gold. We wouldn't be celebrating America 250 if it wasn't for the strongest foundation as set by the framers. Hamilton built America's financial foundation on the principle of sound, stable money, a principle later embodied by the gold standard. However, America abandoned that discipline in 1971 and has since then seen inflation erode the dollar's value. What is the foundation of your savings? Is it gold or something that can be shaken, disrupted, or devalued? Birch Gold Group has been helping Americans solidify their savings with gold for the past 15 years. They'll help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. Learn how gold fits into your portfolio by texting Bannon, BANNON, to the number 989898. You'll receive a free, no-obligation info kit with an A+ rating with a Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews. Let Birch Gold help build your foundation with gold. Once again, text Bannon to 989898. All right, Frank, moving on. Someone's feathers have been ever so slightly ruffled. The US ambassador to the Holy See, Brian Birch, wrote an article, I think it was in the New York Times, basically saying that when Leo does his overt politicking, promoting the invasion and so on, he's simply speaking in the capacity as the head of state of a sovereign nation, the Vatican City State, the smallest sovereign nation in the world, and therefore, obviously, that hit home. So the Vatican, on its own official website, Vatican News, published an op-ed by Andrea Tornielli, who's effectively the director of communications for the Vatican, saying that is an incorrect interpretation of the event, misleading. It's misleading to suggest that. They didn't mention Brian Birch by name. Interestingly, I think some of this might be somewhat performative because the Pope himself, just on July the 4th, after spending the day agitating for the invasion down at Lampedusa, in which War Room's own Jenny Holland came out with the most memorable phrase of this that I have yet seen in any media, when she said it was basically he was giving off all the vibes of a scorned girlfriend on social media, saying, "Look at me, sort of living my best life without you." So there he wasn't doing anything American on July the 4th, just pushing for the invasion. But he did go over to the home, the private residence of Ambassador Birch and his 9 kids that evening on the 4th. So all of this, I sort of think of it's ever so slightly of a performative nature, but it does raise some interesting points. And what we're going to discuss now, frankly, will roll over into the second half of the show as well, because the Vatican, without mentioning Ambassador Birch, they basically doubled down on this argument that no, when the Pope is pushing his left-wing, dodgy, crypto-communist politics, he's absolutely doing that as universal shepherd. And of course, as we discuss the rest of the stories in today's show, you'll I think, get a clearer sense, the Warren posse following at home, just how obnoxious that that pretense is. But just recount for us in your own words, Frank, what happened this week with that story.
You're right. It was, I think, in response to what Jenny was reporting, that horrible scene that he made that I think made an enemy of all of Europe at the Isle of Lampedusa. In the end of the 4th of July events, he had his dinner with Brian Birch, the Trump's ambassador, and they said he ate the whole dinner and he ate the apple pie and everything. And after that, they interviewed him at the New York Times, and that's where he said that the Pope only speaks politics. He's speaking politically. He's not speaking like a Pope. So you're right. It's so performative because the left and the bishops and the apparatus of Leo Church, they pretend that when Leo, that Leo's speaking the gospel when he's teaching all this evil politics, and so they're pretending. But then the conservatives and the White House, they pretend that when he's not talking like that, he does do some Pope things, some Catholic things on the side, Like, when does he ever do that? He never, ever says anything Catholic. So they're both pretending. And I think when Brian Birch hit the New York Times, and that's when he really made the people of the Vatican, the men at the Vatican, annoyed, because they don't like to get that kind of press. And they said, wait a minute. This is the actual gospel. Now that this exposes why we have a Leo instead of a Catholic Pope, and the same as why we had a Francis instead of a Catholic Pope. It's sort of a trick in order to make the leftist and globalist politics seem like it's Catholic, but I don't think it works on a lot of people. A lot of people aren't going to be buying it, and I think it's unpopular.
I'm going to use Bergoglio's expression here, and it taking it out of his context. But this is spiritual abuse, I think, where when hierarchs are pushing their personal political views on the church and saying, no, these aren't personal political views. This is the gospel, right? Roma locut est, right? This is the gospel. That's spiritual abuse, and it's that's the practice of a religious cult. When that goes on, it actually fulfills exactly what the Protestants say about the Catholic Church, that everyone's in it simply, but it's basically a giant cult, and everyone in it believes exactly what the Pope tells them to believe. And we say, no, that's not true. There's a magisterium and all the rest of it, and the Pope is bound by the teachings of the Church. It's his role to protect them. That's true technically, but if you look at the actual praxis of the Church, 99% of this so-called 1.4 billion member church, they do exactly this. Screw top, open the head. The Vatican puts the thoughts in and then close the head, and that is the practice of a cult.
Well,
let's talk specifically about this issue about Iran, because this is again in the article. Viewers of the show will know I have certain reservations about the US Israel, the whole thing, the wiping out of the Ayatollah, his family, from the 28th of February onwards. But those are my private views, right? Catholics are allowed to have private views. People who follow politics are allowed to have private views. Leo's coming in and saying that the US-led military campaign did not meet the church's definition of a just war. Surely he has no charism as Pope to make that determination. That is irony of ironies, as clarified by the Second Vatican Council. That is the job of the laity. It's the job of the laity to renew the temporal sphere, right? So here's what this is the trick, and Bergoglio is just the same. They they criticize the pre-conciliar church, insist that the Second Vatican Council is binding on all Catholics, and then once they've done that, to use the un-Catholic elements of the Second Vatican Council to destroy the Catholic faith, create a holocaust of the Catholic faith around the church. Then they revert to type of being more pre-conciliar with their clericalism than the pre-conciliar church ever was. Who is Pope Leo to say whether these criteria meet just war theory.
Yeah, well, and he
over and above anybody else.
He undermines himself because, he says, I pronounce this not just, instead of leaving that like capital punishment to the discretion of the authorities, like you're saying here. But Leo has pronounced many, many, many times over that he doesn't think just war is possible, that it's not, there is no just war doctrine. The church's teaching on war is that it's always, always wrong. And the White House and the Vatican are trying to be not offend each other's constituencies. They're being very gentle with each other, but the people know that Leo is always the one that's on the aggressive with this discrepancy between the two. They see that the fight is always being started from the Vatican, and I think that in the end that makes the whole thing look bad. And Leo and the White House doesn't really need to do much to demonstrate that. Just like they say all wars are bad, and they keep attacking the White House for having any war at all.
This is the irony, isn't it? You're allowed in the Catholic Church, according to the hierarchy in the run of so-called popes, you are allowed to believe anything you want to believe, as long as it's not Catholic. When it comes to the prudential issues, which the Catholic Church has always taught belong to the laity, to you don't even know, to the men of goodwill, to all men of goodwill, to decide for themselves what the best way is of arriving at the common good. Those things, right? The prudential issues. Now the Vatican, on all of these things, the Vatican is saying, we'll tell you what to think. So on all the prudential issues, the Vatican tells you what to think. On the actual things that pertain to the faith, you're not allowed to believe those. Back with Frank Walker in 2 minutes.
Still America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet? No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored, and it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
That's right. You can follow all of your favorites. Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec.
And so many more.
Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
Welcome back. So this now story is the one I've been waiting to get my claws into with Frank Walker. Okay, so this is where you get to see the latent communism in the Vatican in all its unglory. So Pope Leo XIV had a lunch with the Pope that was hosted on July the 11th in the Papal Gardens at Castel Gandolfo, and he went on and on and on about eliminating the causes of poverty. Now, I remember 20 years ago when I worked in the European Parliament, it was starkest for me. That's really when I learnt this lesson. The centre-right was performative on this issue on poverty eradication. It did talk a little bit about wealth creation. It was there, but it was performative. The left didn't have any of it. The whole focus on the left on poverty eradication is wealth distribution. And that really does ideologically differ, Frank Walker. It separates like the sheep from the goats, the left from the right. Because the left are obsessed with widening the slice of the pie so that the poor can get a larger slice of the pie.
Yeah.
I say that the centre right is performative about this. It is, and that's because it's repeating arguments that it hasn't really intuited or understood. But a far better way, and I would suggest that no country on earth illustrates this fact better than the United States. The better way of poverty eradication is not in the continental way or the Latin American way, South American way, of just confiscating wealth from the rich and giving it to the poor so that the poor can get a larger quadrant of the pie. The better way is to make the pie larger, right? That is the story of America. If you think about the United States from from the Pilgrim Fathers on down, but also the waves and waves of people who came over to the States from Ireland and from Italy and what have you, not coming for welfare benefits, coming to work and to contribute. You have this story literally, with the Pilgrim Fathers. Basically, people with literally nothing getting off boats, right, and setting up farmsteads for centuries and working. And the United States is now the wealthiest society, the wealthiest civilization, if I can use that word for one simple country, the wealthiest nation that has ever existed in the history of mankind. And it's built on the back of people, basically peasants, unwashed peasants, coming in and getting off the boat, rolling up their sleeves and working hard. Right? There's no landed aristocracy to start off with in the United States. People, they either accumulated wealth, possibly in some cases they robbed it via government licenses. But America is the story of wealth creation. And it's a very great story, right?
Right.
But not everyone understands. Not everyone understands that.
No,
so you have this. Let me put it like this. This is the difference between South America and North America, the idea of how to alleviate poverty. There is nothing here, and this is why we said on the show that it's really wrong. I mean, Leo might have been born in Illinois, but he shouldn't really be considered to be the first American Pope, because there's nothing uniquely American in his thought or philosophy. It's all Latin American. It's all South American, which is where he had most of his adult life. There is nothing in his speech at Castel Gandolfo, nothing whatsoever about wealth creation in his how do we, let's eradicate poverty speech.
No, and there's nothing Catholic about that either. It's against the 10 Commandments to take what people belongs rightly to people who have worked hard for it and give it to somebody else. There's nothing in the 10 Commandments about that. There's nothing in the Catholic teaching about that. And in the American system is to have a supportive environment for people to work hard and be productive and get out of the way and leave them alone. Let them have their life, their property, their body to do what they think is best. And those things are God given to us, So what Leo is talking about is not giving anything to anybody. Liberals never want to give anything to anybody. They always want to support bigger government. And that's what Leo's, he loves Castle Gandolfo. He's there every year, and it's his favorite place. It's converted into, I call it the Castle Gandolfo Climate Center and Resort, because that's basically what it is. And Leo uses the resort, and to have 200 of the poor. It was originally they called it the poor in the news, but now as the press came out on it, it was really Leo's 200 socially vulnerable. That's who he met with. So he was like in his glory there. A free lunch for the socially vulnerable, which means all the grievance groups that the political left will embrace, all the anti-Catholic groups that are pushing against the church's teaching. They were all there in one lunch that somebody else paid for, So yeah, Leo made all kinds of speeches because he was so happy. He was hungry for the justice and authentic charity. I think that's what you're talking about, Ben. Authentic charity. That means when you skim money off of productive people and hand it out to people that didn't earn it. That's what authentic charity is in Leo's mind. A church that truly knows how to open its doors and receive everyone. That means people who are in like third marriages, people that are having a gay lifestyle, people that hate the church and the church's teaching. He wants them to open doors and come back in again. That's just violating the church teaching. The church needs these people to reform and repent and then be welcomed into heaven, because heaven doesn't play these games. That's Catholic teaching. But Leo wants to advocate for that. Eliminate poverty, and the causes of injustices must be removed, which means your money is causing the injustice that other people don't have it. And then there's a spirit of encounter around the round table. And here's something. Jesus is present at this table of Leo's lunch with the socially vulnerable around the table. This part really gets me. That is what the Catholic Mass is. Jesus is present at the Catholic altar. That's the table. And you see it's being exploited and misused and twisted. It's such an evil thing to do, to take the Catholic Church like a parasite and destroy it for all of this blather that we're supposed to think is this new religion.
It's the SSPX bishops that are excommunicated.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And, you know, he said something here else. He said he is now, title of Pope is the builder of bridges, which is the title of Father Martin, the famous gay advocate priest's book, A Builder of Bridges. A bridge to evil is when he wants a bridge to here, a bridge to this cause, a bridge to that evil cause, to that evil cause.
It's a bridge
That's
to nowhere.
New title for a whole new Pope. Builder of bridges.
It's a bridge to nowhere. So Frank Walker, you're not convinced by this guy living in a huge marble palace coming out, reeling off a few socialist platitudes about poverty elimination. You don't think that's going to do the trick? You don't think that's going to fill? See, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. If you want a true, I mean, it doesn't get the newspaper headlines, but a true way of dealing with poverty eradication, first and foremost, the issue of the fundamental problem issue of the causes of poverty is insufficient wealth creation. Okay, first and foremost. And even the left ought to be forced and constrained to admit that even if all they want to do is distribute wealth, you can't distribute wealth until it's been created, right?
Yeah.
So the fundamental issue is wealth creation, but it's not simply wealth creation, because you can have a look at, say, and I don't want to, it's a bit vulgar to pick someone out just because they have a lot of money, but we'll mention Elon Musk, who's the world's first trillionaire, and I'm not someone, and I'm not saying remotely to take his wealth from him and give it to other people. I'm not saying that. But simple wealth creation isn't going to eradicate deficiencies of wealth, which is what poverty is. So on one issue, you need wealth creation, but you also need participation and opportunity in wealth creation. Because everyone needs to have a seat at the table through fair works and through contribution. Right? I don't believe in redistribution.
Right.
But a fair society would highlight, it seems to me that anyone interested in promoting a fair society on political terms, first of all, you need to spread the gospel. And then after you've done that, talk about wealth creation and also talk about what can be done to allow greater participation in the opportunities of wealth creation, so that everyone, according to their abilities, to create wealth, might have a little share of what is created. But that's not where this is pure demagoguery. That's not what these people are interested in. They're fundamentally not interested in poverty eradication.
And they want
it's performative, and it's demagoguery. That's fundamentally what this is, under the veneer of being compassionate.
They're not helping the little guy. The little guy can be helped through Christian love and support, but it's not going to be helped by, like, for example, taking over the whole process of writing AI code, which is what they want to do because it's going to make it more human. They're just inserting themselves into these issues in order to skim a little piece for themselves, just like any liberal. So yeah, that Leo is not representing love for Christianity for men at all, but the church historically has helped poor people all over the place, because when you help them have virtue, and for thousands of years, when you give them a leg up and you teach them virtue and you teach communities to be loving and you teach rich people to have responsibility for the poor in a way that is within God's laws, yes, you have a thriving community there, and you have young people with a leg up, like you mentioned.
Christ said you'll always have the poor with you. If Christ hadn't said that, I would have a problem even talking about the poor as a category of people, because I don't like the idea of defining people, even if your intention is compassionate, defining people as a category by their wealth possessions. I don't like it. But in any case, in any case, You're not going to do anything for the poor if you're just pursuing the like an orgy of narcissistic, look at me, everybody, compassion exhibitionism, which is what's going on in the Vatican right now. Frank Walker, back now to discuss the story I mentioned at the beginning of the show, just in 30 seconds. Quick shout out once again to Birch Gold. I mentioned earlier how well gold is doing right now, and the possibilities that you might want to invest in that, get in right now at the present slightly lower price of $4,000 per ounce. Text Philip Patrick and his team. Text Bannon, BANNON to 989898, and ask Philip for details of how you might invest, what it takes, what it involves. All right, okay. We have like 5 minutes of the show now just to discuss this story. So we have this 28-year-old, naval veteran who'd had some kind of blood infection or something. Heart stopped. The brain scans said that he was quite brain dead. His thalamus in his brain, literally, according to the MRI scan, was black and dead. So he's found on the floor. His girlfriend called the paramedics. They said, "Look, he's dead." The family said he'd expressed an interest in donating his organs. Should he die? So the girlfriend said, "Look, give him 10 days, and if there's no change or anything, then proceed." Because if they're removing the heart, they have to sort of basically remove it and stitch it into someone else, a donor, a recipient. I think within an hour. It's very, very quick that they have to do this. I think they turned the machine off. They gave him the walk of honor in the hospital ward, and then literally, I think it's just a case of moments before putting the scalpel in to the harvesting, he woke up. As I said at the beginning, Frank, this isn't an explicitly Catholic story. I'm not aware that any member of the family was praying a novena or that there were any relics or special intercessions sought on this occasion. But it is a story, I think, that underlines the importance of human life from conception until natural death. Especially in the as society ceases, or as society de-Christianizes itself and starts to become so more utilitarian, there is that pressure when you have someone in this situation. Look, okay, so this is one person, but these organs can save many, many people's lives if we strip them out now. But of course, Christians, neither Catholics nor Protestants, can be utilitarian in this sense. And I just thought it was an interesting story, and it sort of underlines the importance of individual people over and above society, the social collective. And it does underline everything that the Catholic Church teaches about the human person, right?
Yes, this is a good example here. A lot of people that are declared brain dead, they hear the things that people have said to them if they wake up. And there are physicists that say they do give off some sort of physical evidence that they're there even after their brain is dead. In fact, the whole idea of brain dead is really just a coma, because you're not really dead unless your heart stops beating and you stop breathing for a while. So what they're really doing is, like you say here, Ben, they're taking somebody who is sort of trapped in a body that is not passing this brain dead test and saying they're not worth living anymore. They should benefit somebody else. To not give your organs at this point, it would be selfish. And they, even though they hit them with a paralyzing agent when they take their organs out, because they're still alive many times, depending on the organ. And they can see their heart rate races. They can feel that they're still living. This whole idea of brain dead organ harvesting and brain dead being dead is a mistake, and it's un-Catholic. And really, this family, a secular family, is a great example. They're being used. It's an oppression of them. This girl, it doesn't say that she prayed, but you can imagine that she prayed a lot. Just give him 10 more days. Maybe he'll live. Let a miracle happen. The world wants to stop that miracle. They want to say that man is dead. It's happening in my family too, because my father is senile, and my their nominally Catholic family is saying, what good is his life? It's hurting him. It's not worth it for him to not going in a nursing home where they'll neglect him. It would be selfish. When I get that old, I don't want to do that. I'll go into that nursing home. But you never meet anyone in that nursing home that wants to be there. And my father's like, what am I doing here? I can afford to be back in my home. I have a nice house, but we don't want to take care of somebody who's like that. He's trapped in a senile body. They don't see his soul as being valuable. His soul is behind that broken brain. And this is the way it is with this man who woke up again. His girlfriend knew that he was in there somewhere. And that's the way that you should look at human life. When we take care of each other in families, even in hard times, because that other person is really trapped and suffering in that situation, we're obligated to each other. That's what love and life is all about. Brain dead is just a coma. Don't be abused by the system. And I wouldn't fill out that organ donor card either, because then you become worth more dead than alive.
My understanding of this is that this guy was absolutely, as the medical profession says, literally dead. His brain was dead. No brain waves, no brain activity. And you think, well, you just mentioned the role of loved ones here. If this guy didn't have a girlfriend who was so persistent, he'd be chopped liver by now. The fact that he's woken up talking and gesticulating, that's down to the tenacity of her girlfriend. And we say this, Frank Walker, on the very day today that over in France they passed the law allowing the right to assisted dying for terminally ill under strict conditions. The vote was 291 to 241 today of all days. So two stories there that go together. Draw what conclusion you will. Frank Walker, 15 seconds. Where do people go to get Canon 212 and Stumbling Block?
Yeah, Canon 212. Spell it all out up in the up at the top of the screen, and Canon 212 spelled out on X. And you can see the daily update on the right column, and at Rumble and at Gloria TV.
I go to the Stumbling Block website every day to find out in just like 5-10 minutes exactly what's going on in the church. Steve, back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. My thanks to Spence at Real America's Voice.